Hello everyone, Jai Hind and good evening. Welcome to the platform of StudyIQIAS in English, and we know that in May the prelims for your UPSC 2026 will be conducted. All right, and at StudyIQ we are here to help you out in clearing your prelims, your mains as well as your interview as well. And that is the motive that we are bringing up with the most important current affairs revision, a complete series where we will be discussing everything in detail. And this is very important. This is very important because when it comes to the current affairs, we have seen the complete shift in the strategy of the UPSC. All right, when it comes to UPSC, all right, UPSC is now using the current affairs and bringing the current affairs into prelims as well as mains, and that is why it is very important that we remain, we remain in touch with the current affairs as well as we see how the current affairs have, they have evolved over a period of time. So this is all that we'll be discussing in today's session. Today's session is about what and how to study the complete current affairs for your upcoming UPSC prelims examination. All right, so if you are live with me, please type in the message and let me know that you're watching this session live. And before starting the session, let's see how UPSC has taken the current affairs and it is asking nowadays about the current affairs in your prelims examination. Now, the first thing is that I'll be just showing you the various questions that were asked in the prelims examination and how they connect to the current affairs. All right. Now, the first question over here is, it was asked in Civil Services Prelims Examination in 2024. And it says that how many delimitation commissions had been constituted by Government of India till December 2023. Now, this complete, hello and good evening, Krishna. All right, now when that comes to this complete news, all right. So over here, you can see that when we are talking about this news over here, just a second. All right, just a sec. So I was talking about this news that this news was there in 2023. All right, and the Constitution amendment or the 120th Amendment Bill was passed by the Parliament in 2023, and that is where the reference was taken. All right, you can see that the bill was introduced on September 19, 2023 in the Parliament, and then it was passed by Lok Sabha and then by Rajya Sabha as well. And that is how UPSC is asking you the questions. All right, it is connecting the dots, and that is how you have to prepare for your civil services. All right, now moving ahead to the another question that was asked in your prelims 2023 is, it is, which of the following organisms perform waggle dance for others of their king to indicate the direction and the distance to a source of their food? So the options were butterflies, dragonflies, and honeybees and wasps. Now, normally when you would be reading this news, all right, over here, this is the news that was there, unlocking secrets of the honeybee dance language. All right, you can note the date as well when this news was published. Now, this news was published on 11th of March 2023. And the question was asked in 2023 Civil Services Prelims Examination about the waggle dance again. All right, so over here you can connect the dots. So that is how you are, or you need to connect the dots over here. All right, another question that was asked was that in the recent years, Chad, Guinea, Mali and Sudan caught the international attention for which one of the following reasons common to all of them. All right, and here you can see that this question was there in 2023, and you can see in December 2021, there was this commentary that is unraveling the string of coups in Africa. Good evening, Kaizen. All right, so now you are seeing that how UPSC thinks while you are going through the newspaper, UPSC is planning your next questions for the prelims. All right, again, moving ahead, these were the regions of the conflict that were mentioned. Donbas, Kachin, Tigray, and the countries where they are located. Again, the question was asked over here about match the following. And again, you can see over here, that is in the Donbas, Russia's vast number of troops weigh heavily on Ukraine's defenders. So again, this question or this news was from March 2nd, 2023. All right, so you are seeing how the UPSC is connecting the current affairs and asking or framing the questions for your upcoming examinations. All right, the same thing you can see over here. This is the term that was in news that is relevant and the question was asked. And here you can see the news that was there, that the Chinese geostrategic expansion in the Levant, a case study of Lebanon. All right, so these are some of the questions that you will see, and ultimately you can now correlate how the UPSC will be asking you the questions in the forthcoming examination that will be conducted in May itself. Now, I know this is very short duration of time, all right, and that is why it is very important to note that how UPSC have planned, or it has evolved over a period of time while it comes to the current affairs. All right, how UPSC is asking the current affairs, which all areas are very important. That is very important to understand, and then only we can move ahead and we can prepare better for the upcoming prelims. And that is very, very important to note over here. All right, when it comes to 2020, let's see over here. In 2020, the weightage of the current affairs was just 19 to 20%. All right, and the dominant areas from which the questions were asked from the current affairs, they were agriculture and science and tech. The level of the examination or the difficulty when it comes to the questions related to the current affairs, that was moderate. But then in 2021, the percentage increased, the weightage increased to 22 to 25% of the questions that were directly hit from the current affairs. All right, at the same time, environment and polity that were focused, and the level of the examination also moved up to moderately tough. All right, then it increased, or it remained at 20 to 25%, and the questions that were asked were from environment, science and tech and environment. Then the percentage shifted to 24 to 37%. All right, now you must be wondering why 24 to 37%, because when it comes to the current affairs, what happens is that some of the questions, they are directly from the current affairs, but the others are kind of they are taken through the static linkage, and that is also that we have to understand. So the first percentage, that is the direct questions that were hit by the current affairs, but the second percentage is where it was linked with the static portion. All right, and that is how the percentage had been calculated. Then in 2024, there were 22 to 24% of the questions that were there in the examination for your prelims, and they were asked directly in the examination. So ultimately over here, it is very important to note that when it comes to the current affairs, there are certain subject areas where UPSC is focusing upon. And you can see this in this complete table. All right, when it comes to environment, you can see that the 5-year average had been 17. All right, this is the average of the questions that you may get in your examination in 2026 as well. All right, at the same time, when it comes to environment and ecology, the focus on the current affairs had been very high when it comes to UPSC. All right, when it comes to the economy and the social development again. So economy and social development is another segment where UPSC is focusing upon the current affairs. And you can see over here also, it is 16.4, that is the trend or the strategic priority that we have to take in consideration is very high. Then it comes the next, we have the next of the segment, that is Indian polity and governance. And in this, again, 16 were the, median or the average of the 5 years, and the strategic priority is quite high. And then comes the history, that is ancient, medieval as well as modern. All right. At the same time, when it comes to the next one, that is the geography. So over here, mapping based questions had been asked, and when it comes to the mapping, again, it becomes medium to high. And then we have science and technology as well, and international relations that had been asked in the examination. So these all things, they are the important weightage areas that we have to cover while moving ahead for the preparation for the current affairs. Now, you can see that there had been a complete change in the dynamics of the complete paper of prelims examination. Now, when it comes to the previous examinations, what used to happen was, in the earlier scenario, what was the major concern was that it was direct questions that were asked. But now the shift that you will see, it is towards the multi-statement and assertion reasoning questions. You will find the multi-statement questions more in your examination as compared to the direct ones. At the same time, when it comes to the different percentage of the questions, so 32% of the questions, they were categorized as hard, and that requires not just single side layering, or understanding. It requires multi-layer understanding of the concepts, and that is how the UPSC is evolving itself. And also when it comes to the examination, it utilizes, you will find three types of primary questions that will be there. The first type is direct recall, and you will see that there are about 26% of the questions that will be based upon direct recall. Alright, at the same time, assertion and reasoning questions will be there, which are about 12%, and then multi-statement questions are the most of the questions which are asked in the examination. That is 62% of the questions, they will be the multi-statement type of the questions that you will get. Now, what are the key priority areas while you are preparing for the UPSC 2026 that you need to cover? Alright, although we will be covering all these in our upcoming sessions, we will be starting off with the first session tomorrow. That will be the species which had been used in news. Alright, and at the same time, the whole of the coverage of these sessions will be right from May 2025 to today. Alright, we will be covering everything that will be asked in the examination. So when it comes to the first series or the first session of the series that had been planned, that is the species in the news. So over there, we'll be covering more than 50 of the species which had been in news in the past 1 year. Alright, so this is again very, very important. But at the same time, when it comes to the UPSC, from where it forms the questions, you would have seen that if there is any kind of anniversary or any commemorative milestones that India has achieved, or any institution has achieved, or it is birth anniversary of any of the personality, so the questions are framed on that basis. At the same time, you will see that there is, when it comes to the current affairs, the UPSC is actually mixing two things. That is, it is mixing concepts as well as the dynamic relations, and it is focusing that you should remember, along with the current events, you should be able to connect it with the static portion as well of your syllabus. And then mapping and conflict zone are the major areas when it comes to the geography, and that is again, it is very much required while preparing for the civil services. Now when it comes to economy, so in economy you will see that these are the things that we have seen in the recent past. Alright, so like for example, there is a World Investment Report 2025, and it says that there had been decline in the FDI or direct investment, foreign direct investment globally, but at the same time India had been ranked 15th. Alright, so again, now this news, it will connect to the trends in FDI. What is FDI, what is FPI, as well as the capital flows. Again, this news connects to that. At the same time, when it comes to RBI repo and the CRR cuts, so repo rate had been at 5.25% and the CRR at 3%, and this has been done to enhance the liquidity. So how could the liquidity could be enhanced when it comes to the the complete economic scenario? At the same time, it also connects to the monetary policy tools that are there, which are there along with the RBI, and how it it infuses the liquidity, or it squeezes the liquidity at the same time. All right. At the same time, when it comes to the number of the questions which had been asked in the UPSC, you will see this trend. That when it comes to the economy, so over here the major focus area of the UPSC is towards the banking and monetary policy, and there is high reliance on the static concepts as well. You should know the static concepts. Alright, at the same time, when it comes to the fiscal policy and budgeting, so it requires precise understanding of the fiscal math and devolution percentages as well. Then there is the focus over the financial and the capital markets. What are the regulations that are being done by the SEBI? At the same time, the government securities or G6, the corporate bonds, as well as the stocks which are there in the news. So over here, the focus is on the market capitalization and disclosure frameworks which are being used. All right. At the same time, it also focuses on the external sector and the trade as well. Okay. Now, when it comes to the environment, so in environment, you would have seen that the questions that are being framed by the UPSC, it is about the species which had been in news. So these are the important species which had been news. So whenever there is any species that is in news, you should know about its status, that is IUCN status, whether it is critically endangered, it is endangered or vulnerable. That is very, very important. And also then you must know the important characteristics or the chief characteristics and how it is significant for the ecosystem. All right. Then when it comes to the environment again, so in environment along with the species, there is also the focus on the biodiversity and the conservation of the various species. Over here, it is very important for connecting the static with the dynamic as well. Like for example, we have lots of flagship species. So when it comes to dolphin, so Project Dolphin becomes very important. When it comes to tiger, the Project Tiger becomes important. All right. At the same time, there are environmental laws and policies as well. Over here, the focus when it comes to UPSC had been on the different laws and the acts which had been framed in India. Like for example, Protection of or Wildlife Protection Act. So ultimately, we should know about the chief statistics as well as the chief features of the act. At the same time, it also focuses on the various conventions and the organizations as well. All right, like for example, COP30 had been organized in Belém, Brazil. So we must know about COP30, the outcomes which had been there. So this is again the focus area of the UPSC. Then pollution, that is air, water and soil pollution, where the UPSC is focusing on the industrial remediation as well. Then the agriculture and the sustainable practices, because this overlap with the economy as well as geography as well, and the climate change, again, it is very important. Like I said, it is centered upon the COP outcomes as well as the science for managing the climate science or climate change. All right, like we have seen the geoengineering, all right, solar engineering or geoengineering, again, it is in news or it was in news and you may find a question related to it. Then when it comes to the environment over here, you can see that how different questions had been asked over the years. All right, over the years, you can see that we have different questions which had been asked in 2021. There were two questions about filter feeders, that is oysters, and detritivores, millipedes and earthworms. All right, in 2022, the question was about Gucci fungus. All right, in 2023, the question was about Wolbachia method. And in 2024, the question was asked about Indian flying fox. And in 2025, there were two species, peacock tarantula and also coconut crab, where the question was raised and question was asked in UPSC. At the same time, when it comes to the ministries as well as the different schemes, this is also the core focus of the UPSC when it comes to the current affairs. So over here, when it comes to education, there are various schemes which are harmonizing the traditional knowledge with the modern technology. That should be our focus. All right. At the same time, agriculture, there is again MSP. We have Har Khet Ko Pani scheme as well as, there are different schemes like PM Kisan Yojana is there. We have PM Asha and E-NAM initiatives. Then social justice, it is about the empowerment of the marginalized citizens or the artisans. And also MITI, the ministry, it is about the digital sovereignty and the cyber resilience that we are building in India. And these are the high focus areas when it comes to the different ministries and their schemes that are there. All right. So these are the things that you have to focus upon while preparing for the next upcoming prelims examination. Now, at the same time, when it comes to polity, so in polity, the major pillar when it connects to the current affairs is the judiciary. All right, whatever the questions had been asked, it is about the landmark judgments which had been there, and these landmark judgments were connected to the current affairs as well. All right, so over here, at the same time, when it comes to mapping, so in mapping, there are regions which had been often mentioned in the news. You can see that different questions were asked about Donbas, Kherson and Zaporizhzhia, then Nagorno-Karabakh region as well, Tigray, Amhara as well, and Cabo Delgado, Kuril Islands and Sahel region as well. So these are the regions which had been mentioned in the news, and that is from where the UPSC has framed the questions when it comes to mapping. All right. At the same time, when it comes to history, so in history, you can see how the shift or the trend is changing in the UPSC. Like for example, when it comes to ancient India, so there is shift towards the material culture, where the questions are being asked about the dancing girl that had been made of the bronze and the evolution of the stupa in India. All right, when it comes to medieval India, this is least frequent now, and in 2025 there was only one question from medieval India. When it comes to modern India, all right, when it comes to modern India, so in modern India there had been the focus on why and also the context of the historical events, like for example Dandi March. So how it is important for salt symbolism. And when it comes to art and culture, you will find that there is increased link towards the current affairs, like for example Hoysala ensembles of the Ramappa temple. So there in the art and culture you have to focus again over the current affairs that are there. Now, what are the all important things that we will be covering in these different of the the series that we'll be planning and will be moving ahead, and we will be conducting every day at the same time, that is at 5 p.m. And these different the topics that we'll be covering is the first session tomorrow will be of the species in news, and I told you there would be more than 50 of the species that I will cover in the session, more than 50 of the series. Species. So you do not have to go through any of the current affairs material, and it would be swift and very precise revision from where the UPSC may ask you the questions. All right, then we'll be covering the schemes in the news tomorrow, day after tomorrow. Then the landmark supreme judgments that had been in news when it comes to 2025 and 26. Then also we'll be moving ahead and we'll be going forward with the bills, acts, as well as the legislative trends that we have seen in the past 1 year. All right, we'll be talking about the places in news. Again, very important for mapping. We'll be talking about science and technology as well. And also, when it comes over here, we'll be talking about the environment that had been in news. Now, when it comes to environment, anything or, the conferences which were there, all right, the conventions, that is what we'll be discussing in our series. And then digital infrastructure and banking reforms. Along with this, the international relations, that is the groupings or the corridors which had been in news. And then we'll be covering and we'll be finalizing with the various reports, the heritage and personalities which had been in news. All right. So all this thing we will be covering in our session. And then when it comes to all these, in the next few days, just before your prelims, or just a few days before your prelims, you will be able to gather at least, I'm saying, 15 to 20 questions that will be directly from this series. All right, so this is how we are planning to conduct the complete series and how we will be progressing ahead. All right, now most important thing is that if you are preparing for 2027 or 28, we are offering you now or for the today itself. All right, this offer is ending today. Please remember this, that we are offering you with 50% of the discount and double validity on all the UPSC courses which are there, and you can use the code that is BRS Live for enrolling into the courses. So these are the two important courses that are there. All right, we have for the GS Foundation, we have Resolution Batch P2I for 2027 and for 2028 as well. And you can enroll into them, and let's start our preparation for the UPSC Prelims 2026 from tomorrow onwards at the same time, that is at 5 o'clock, and we will be conducting these sessions where you will have a complete idea or the complete current affairs knowledge, the plethora of the knowledge that had been in news for the past 1 year. All right, so that would be all. Thank you very much, guys, for joining me over here, and I will see you again in next session tomorrow at 5 o'clock. All right, thank you very much, Kaizen, for joining me here, and the others as well who have been with me and also who will be seeing this session after this has been ended. Thank you very much, guys, for joining us at StudyIQIAS in English, and let's start our complete preparation, the complete revision of the current affairs that we have seen in the past 1 year, so that we score good in the prelims 2026. Thank you, bye-bye, take care, and Jai Hind.